The great crystal hall on Zephyria Prime stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of alien beings filled the space, their voices creating a buzz that echoed off the transparent walls. Some looked like giant insects with multiple arms and glowing eyes. Others appeared as floating balls of pure light that pulsed different colors when they spoke. Many had forms that human eyes could barely understand. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the back section marked for observers. Her simple, black suit looked plain compared to the elaborate costumes and natural armor of the other beings around her. She held a small tablet in her hands, taking notes as different species presented their achievements to the Galactic Council. The Council met every 200 years to discuss new members and important galactic matters. Today, Earth had requested to join their alliance. Sarah knew it would not be easy. Humans were still new to space travel compared to these ancient civilizations. A massive creature that looked like a dragon stood up at the main podium. His name was Councillor Thexmore, and he represented the Draconian hegemony. His scales were dark green and shifted color as he moved. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire hall, without any technology to make it louder. "Fellow Council, members," Thexmore began, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Today we must decide if these humans deserve to join our alliance." He said the word humans like it tasted bad in his mouth. The hall grew quiet. Sarah felt hundreds of alien eyes turn toward her. She kept her face calm and continued writing notes. Thexmore waved one clawed hand, and a huge holographic display appeared above the crowd. It showed Earth's solar system, with tiny human ships moving between the planets. The ships looked like metal boxes compared to the sleek vessels of other species. "Look at their primitive technology," Thexmore continued. "Their fastest ships can barely reach 15% of light speed. They burn fuel like ancient creatures while we travel through dimensional rifts that cross the galaxy in days." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A being made of pure energy flickered brighter as it laughed. Several insect-like creatures clicked their mandibles in amusement. The hologram changed to show human weapons, simple missiles, basic laser cannons, and metal bullets. More laughter filled the hall. "They still use kinetic projectiles," said a voice from the Corellan Empire section, "like throwing rocks at each other. Their weapons cannot even penetrate our basic shields," added another voice. Thexmore nodded with satisfaction. "But their primitive technology is not the worst problem. Watch this." The hologram now showed Earth itself. Images of wars, pollution, and conflict flashed across the display. Humans fighting humans over land, water, and resources that advanced species could create from nothing. "They fight among themselves constantly," Thexmore declared. "They poison their own world while any civilized species would have cleaned it centuries ago. They worship imaginary gods and kill each other over different beliefs. They have barely colonized their own star system while some of us rule entire galactic sectors." The laughter grew louder. Some beings were actually falling over with amusement. Sarah heard comments in dozens of languages, most of which her translator could barely handle. "Barbaric," said one voice. "Like children playing with fire," said another. "Violent savages," added a third. Sarah stood up. The hall slowly grew quiet as thousands of beings looked at her. She walked down the long aisle toward the speaking platform. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. "Honored council members," she began, her voice steady. "I thank you for this opportunity to address your concerns about humanity. What possible defense could you offer for such primitive behavior?" Thexmore asked, his head tilting to study her like a predator examining prey. Sarah looked up at the holographic images still floating above the crowd. Earth looked small and blue against the vast displays of alien technology and power. "You are correct that we are less advanced than your civilizations," she said. "We do still fight wars. We do still struggle with problems you solved long ago. We are chaotic and unpredictable. Then why should we accept you?" demanded a voice from the crowd. Sarah smiled slightly. "Because sometimes different ways of thinking can be valuable. Our chaos might seem primitive to you, but it has helped us survive on a dangerous world. Our conflicts have taught us to adapt quickly to new situations. Our unpredictability might someday prove useful to the Alliance. The hall erupted in laughter again. This time it was even louder. Useful? Thexmore's scales rippled with amusement. What could chaos and violence possibly contribute to civilized species? We solve problems differently than you do, Sarah replied. We combine ideas that should not work together. We try things that logic says will fail. Sometimes this creates disasters, but sometimes it creates solutions no one expected. A being that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed bright orange. Your primitive thinking is exactly why you should not be here. The galaxy needs order, not chaos. We need logic, not emotion, added a crystal creature whose voice sounded like breaking glass. Sarah nodded politely. I understand your concerns. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps humanity is not ready to join your alliance. She pulled out her tablet and began typing notes. Could you tell me more about your dimensional rift technology and your matter synthesis capabilities? I want to make sure our records are accurate. For the next hour, council members eagerly described their advanced technologies. They showed off their ability to create matter from energy, to travel faster than light through folded space, and to communicate instantly across galactic distances. Sarah took careful notes on everything. She asked detailed questions about how their technologies worked, what limitations they had, and how they defended against various threats. The council members were happy to share information, treating her like a student learning from superior teachers. Finally, the formal vote began. One by one, each species cast their decision. The results were exactly what Sarah had expected. The application of Earth for council membership is rejected unanimously, announced the council speaker, an ancient being that looked like a tree made of metal. We suggest that humanity develop more advanced technology and peaceful civilization before applying again. Perhaps in 1,000 years you will be ready to join civilized society. Sarah stood up and bowed politely to the assembled crowd. Thank you for your time and consideration. We understand your decision and respect your wisdom. As she gathered her things to leave, Thexmore called out to her. Human ambassador, do not be discouraged. Even primitive species can evolve if given enough time. I am sure you are right, counselor, Sarah replied calmly. Thank you for the advice. She walked back up the long aisle toward the exit. Behind her, the council members were already moving on to other business. Most had forgotten about Earth and its failed application. Sarah reached the exit and paused to look back one more time. The great crystal hall was filled with beings of incredible power and intelligence. Their technologies could reshape matter, bend space, and control energy itself. They had conquered death, eliminated poverty, and created paradise worlds across the galaxy. But as she watched them, Sarah noticed something interesting. They all thought in similar ways. They used the same types of logic. They approached problems with the same advanced methods. They had become so similar that they barely needed to discuss decisions anymore. Sarah smiled to herself as she left the hall. Sometimes being different was more valuable than being advanced. She had a feeling that humanity's rejection might not be permanent. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and someday the council might need allies who thought differently than they did. As her small human transport ship prepared to leave Zephyria Prime, Sarah uploaded all her notes to Earth's databases. Every piece of technology the council had described was now recorded in human computers. Every weakness they had mentioned was carefully catalogued. Humanity had been rejected today, but they had also learned valuable lessons about their potential allies and enemies. Sarah had a feeling those lessons would prove useful sooner than anyone expected. 3 months after Earth's rejection, the galaxy faced its worst nightmare. The first reports came from border colonies near Draconian space. Ships arrived empty at trading stations. Entire settlements went silent without sending distress calls. Patrol fleets simply disappeared. At first, the Galactic Council assumed these were isolated incidents. Pirates sometimes attacked remote outposts. Equipment failures happened. Space was dangerous even for advanced civilizations. But the pattern quickly became impossible to ignore. On the crystal world of Kirill 7, morning came to find 5 million colonists simply gone. Their cities remained intact. Food was still cooking in kitchens. Vehicles sat abandoned in the middle of streets, but no living being remained anywhere on the planet. The Kirellan Empire sent investigation teams immediately. Their advanced sensors found no signs of battle, no weapon signatures, no evidence of struggle. The colonists had not been killed or captured. They had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind empty clothes and personal belongings. Similar reports flooded in from across 3 galactic sectors. The energy beings of Lumina reported that their home dimension was being drained by some unknown force. Their bright forms grew dimmer each day as something pulled energy from their realm. The ancient Vextai hive worlds went silent next. These insect-like beings shared thoughts across their entire species through quantum connections that spanned light years. Suddenly, that connection went dead. The few Vextai off-world when it happened described feeling like part of their souls had been torn away. Council emergency sessions began immediately. The great crystal hall on Zephyria Prime filled with frightened representatives demanding answers that no one could provide. "The attacks are coordinated," reported Admiral Zexhai of the Kirellan fleet. "Whatever is causing this strikes multiple targets simultaneously across vast distances. Our best scientists cannot detect the weapon being used," added Dr. Lumara from the Advanced Research Division. "It leaves no energy signatures, no quantum traces, no evidence at all." But the most terrifying report came from a Draconian defector named Silmoth. He had escaped from hegemony space with information that made the entire council freeze in horror. "It is the hegemony itself," Silmoth announced, his scales pale with fear. "Thexmore and his inner circle have developed weapons beyond anything we imagined. They call them the Erasure Fleet." The defector activated a holographic display showing massive Draconian ships unlike anything seen before. These vessels seemed to flicker in and out of reality, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "They have learned to phase shift entire fleets across dimensional layers," Silmoth continued. "Your weapons cannot hit targets that exist in 17 different realities at once, but they can strike you from any of those dimensions." The council members listened in growing terror as Silmoth described the new Draconian weapons. Matter disintegrators that unmade atomic bonds, turning solid objects into component particles. Reality anchors that prevented faster-than-light travel, trapping victims in normal space. Most horrible of all were the consciousness extractors. "They do not kill," Silmoth explained, his voice barely a whisper. "They remove the awareness, the thinking part of living beings, while leaving bodies perfectly intact. The victims remain, alive but completely empty." Panic spread through the council. These were civilizations that had conquered their home systems, defeated natural disasters, and eliminated most forms of death through advanced technology. But they had never faced an enemy that could erase consciousness itself. Emergency defense. Plans were created immediately. The most advanced species combined their technologies in desperate attempts to counter the Draconian threat. Kirellan dimensional shields were merged with Vextai quantum prediction systems. Lumina energy weapons were enhanced with crystal world-focusing arrays. Nothing worked. The Draconian fleets moved like a plague across the spiral arm. Every defense the council created was swept aside as if it did not exist. Phase-shifted ships appeared without warning in heavily defended systems. Ancient fortress worlds that had stood for millennia were found empty within hours of attack. Dr. Lumara spent sleepless days trying to understand how the Erasure Fleet could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, while still maintaining coordinated attacks. Her advanced quantum computers ran millions of calculations but could not find a solution. "The mathematics are impossible," she reported to an increasingly desperate council. "Nothing should be able to maintain coherent form across 17 dimensional phases. The energy requirements alone would drain entire stars." But somehow the Draconians had solved that problem. Their fleets grew larger each day as more traditional Draconian ships were converted to the new phase shift technology. Intelligence reports suggested that Thexmore planned to erase all non-Draconian life from the galaxy. creating an empire of empty worlds populated only by his own species. The attacks accelerated. Entire star systems went silent daily. Refugee. Fleets fled toward the galactic core, carrying survivors from dozens of species. But the Draconian advance was faster than any evacuation effort. Council military commanders held strategy meetings around the clock. But every plan they proposed had the same fatal flaw. How could they fight enemies they could not see or touch? Traditional warfare is impossible, admitted General Korthal of the Combined Defense Forces. Our weapons pass through their phase-shifted hulls like they are firing at ghosts. We need new approaches, suggested Admiral Zexai. Technologies we have never tried before. But the Council's greatest weakness became apparent in those desperate hours. Their civilizations had become so advanced and orderly that they could only think in established patterns. Every solution they proposed used existing technologies in predictable ways. Dr. Lamara tried combining Kirillin dimensional manipulation with Vextai quantum entanglement. The resulting weapon system was incredibly sophisticated, but had no effect on phase-shifted targets. The crystal beings attempted to create resonance fields that would force the Draconian ships back into normal space. Their calculations were perfect, but the enemy fleet simply shifted to different dimensional phases. Each failure brought the Erasure fleet closer to the galactic core. Soon they would reach the Council's most important worlds. Zephyria Prime itself was only weeks away from the advancing threat. In desperation, some Council members suggested surrendering. Perhaps Thexmore would show mercy to species that submitted voluntarily. Silmoth crushed that hope immediately. The hegemony considers all non-Draconian life to be inferior, he explained. Surrender will not save you. Nothing will save you except stopping them completely. As the situation grew more desperate, a few Council members began to wonder if they should have accepted different allies when they had the chance. The Lumina beings mentioned that even chaotic approaches might be worth trying. What about those humans who applied for membership? One representative suggested quietly. The primitives? Responded another. What could they possibly do against technology we cannot defeat? The suggestion was quickly dismissed. Earth's weapons were thousands of years behind Draconian technology. Human ships moved like crawling insects compared to the Erasure fleet. Their chaotic thinking and primitive approaches could not possibly help against such an advanced threat. But, as reports of new attacks reached the Council daily, some members began to have doubts. Their ordered, logical approaches had failed completely. Their advanced technologies were useless against phase-shifted enemies. Dr. Lumara found herself staring at her failed calculations, wondering if perfect mathematics might not be enough to solve every problem. Admiral Zexai questioned whether predictable military tactics could defeat unpredictable enemies. In the Outer Rim territories, the last free colonies prepared for their final stand. The Draconian Erasure fleet was only days away from their positions. Once those worlds fell, nothing would stand between Thexmore and the galactic core. The Council had run out of time and options. Their most advanced civilizations had created the most sophisticated defenses in galactic history, but sophistication meant nothing against enemies who existed outside normal reality. In the depths of space, Draconian fleets prepared for their final assault. Thexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching sensor displays that showed empty system after empty system. Soon the galaxy would belong entirely to his species. He thought briefly of the human ambassador who had requested membership months ago. Such a primitive species would never have survived long enough to see the galaxy's transformation anyway. Better that they had been rejected when they could die in ignorance of their true place in the universe. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working late in the Xenological Studies Center when the first distress signal reached Earth. The message was broken and hard to understand, coming through an old quantum communicator left behind by a Kirillin trade mission. Emergency, all fleets destroyed. Consciousness extraction. Warn everyone. The signal cut out before Elena could get more information. She tried to re-establish contact, but found only static across all frequencies. Something was very wrong in the galaxy. Within hours, more signals arrived. Radio transmissions from fleeing refugee ships, quantum bursts from automated distress beacons, emergency broadcasts in dozens of alien languages. Elena's translation computers worked around the clock to decode the messages, and the picture they painted was terrifying. The Draconian hegemony had turned against the other council species. Their fleets were erasing entire civilizations from existence. Advanced species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were vanishing without a trace. Elena immediately contacted the United Earth Defense Council. Within 6 hours, every major world leader was connected through emergency channels. President Martinez spoke from the lunar colonies, while General Harrison joined from the Mars orbital platforms. "The situation is worse than anything we prepared for," Elena explained, displaying the translated messages on holographic screens. "The aliens who rejected our membership application 3 months ago are being destroyed by one of their own species." "How is that possible?" asked General Harrison. "These civilizations have technology thousands of years ahead of ours." "According to the reports, the Draconians have developed weapons that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously," Elena replied. "Traditional defenses are useless because you cannot hit targets that phase between realities." President Martinez leaned forward in her chair. "What does this mean for Earth? Are we next?" "Unknown," Elena admitted. "But if the Draconians defeat the Council species completely, they will eventually reach our solar system. We need to decide how to respond." The debate that followed would have seemed impossible to the orderly Council species. Earth's leaders argued, disagreed, and changed their minds repeatedly. Military commanders wanted to hide and hoped the Draconians overlooked them. Scientists wanted to study the problem more before acting. Politicians worried about the cost of any intervention, but underneath all the arguments was a shared human instinct that the aliens had never understood. When faced with bullies, humans had a tendency to fight back regardless of the odds. "We cannot just hide and hope they ignore us," declared Admiral Chen, the daughter of the ambassador who had been rejected by the Council. "If we let them destroy everyone else, we will face them alone eventually." "What can we possibly do?" asked Dr. Patel from the Engineering Corps. "Our weapons are primitive compared to theirs." "Maybe primitive is exactly what we need," suggested Colonel Reeves from Special Operations. "These phase-shifted ships defeated advanced weapons easily. Perhaps they are not designed to handle simple attacks." Within days, Earth's response was taking shape. Unlike the Council species with their careful planning and orderly hierarchies, humanity's approach was chaotic and experimental. Every branch of human knowledge was thrown at the problem simultaneously. Military engineers worked with video game designers to create new targeting systems. Quantum physicists collaborated with street fighters to understand unpredictable movement patterns. Musicians analyzed the frequency reports of alien distress calls, while mathematicians studied the chaos theory applications of dimensional phase shifting. Captain Maria Santos was chosen to lead the mission. She had commanded exploration vessels in the outer solar system and had a reputation for creative problem-solving. Her crew was selected not for their advanced training, but for their ability to think differently. The fleet that assembled at Luna Base looked like a flying junkyard, compared to the sleek vessels of galactic civilizations. Human ships were retrofitted with captured alien technology that had been reverse-engineered and modified. Fusion drives were combined with exotic matter cores. Kinetic weapons were loaded with experimental ammunition made from crystallized dark matter. Most unusually, every ship carried modified civilian electronics running simulation software originally designed for entertainment. Video game engines that could calculate millions of variables simultaneously were converted into tactical prediction systems. Dr. Yuki Tanaka joined the mission as Chief Science Officer. She had been studying the quantum mechanics reports from the refugee ships and had developed a theory that made other scientists laugh. "The Draconian phase shifting is not magic," she explained to the skeptical crew. "It uses quantum entanglement to maintain coherence across multiple dimensional layers. But quantum systems are fragile. The right kind of interference could destabilize their entire network." "What kind of interference?" Captain Santos asked. "Chaos," Dr. Tanaka replied simply. "Pure, unpredictable chaos that their ordered systems Cannot process. As the human fleet prepared to launch, they received one final transmission from the galaxy. The message came from New Corella, one of the last free worlds where survivors from dozens of species had gathered for a final stand. 3 Draconian fleets approaching, the transmission reported. Hundreds of phase-shifted ships. We cannot stop them. If anyone receives this message, remember that we tried to preserve civilization against the darkness. Captain Santos looked at her crew. Humans from every nation on Earth, representing different cultures, languages, and ways of thinking. They had volunteered for a mission that every logical analysis said was impossible. Are we really going to do this? Asked Lieutenant Rodriguez from the navigation station. Are we going to fight enemies that defeated civilizations millions of years old? Yes, Captain Santos replied without hesitation. Because somebody has to, and maybe being young and stupid is exactly what this situation needs. The human fleet launched from Luna Base with little ceremony, 50 ships carrying 5,000 volunteers toward a battle. They had almost no chance of winning. Behind them, Earth's population watched and waited, knowing that their planet's future depended on this desperate mission. As they traveled toward the galactic core, the crew studied every scrap of information about Draconian technology. They ran simulations, tested theories, and prepared equipment that had never been used in combat before. Dr. Tanaka spent most of the journey working on her chaos theory calculations. If she was right, the Draconian quantum entanglement network that allowed phase shifting could be disrupted by introducing too many unpredictable variables at once. Think of it like this, she explained to the other officers. Their system is like a perfect orchestra playing a complex symphony. Every instrument must be perfectly synchronized or the whole performance falls apart. So we need to be the drunk person who stumbles onto the stage and starts yelling random words? Asked Lieutenant Park from engineering. Exactly, Dr. Tanaka smiled. But we need to be very precise about how we create that chaos. As they approached the edge of Draconian space, long-range sensors detected the 3 converging fleets that were moving toward New Corella. The readings confirmed the worst fears. Hundreds of ships that flickered in and out of normal space, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The refugee defenders at New Corella were already under attack. Their weapons passed harmlessly through the phase-shifted Draconian vessels, while consciousness extractors began their horrible work on the planet's surface. Captain Santos gathered her crew for a final briefing before they entered the battle zone. Everything we know about space combat says we cannot win this fight, she told them. Our ships are slower, our weapons are weaker, and we have no defense against their consciousness extractors. She paused and looked at the faces around her. Humans who had volunteered to fight impossible odds because it was the right thing to do. But we have something they do not expect. We think differently than they do. We combine ideas that should not work together. We try things that logic says will fail. And sometimes, she continued with a slight smile, that creates miracles. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Corella system. Ahead of them, the battle was already underway. Massive Draconian ships flickered like ghosts as they destroyed the last defenders of galactic civilization. Captain Santos took a deep breath and gave the order that would change galactic history. All ships, ignore the enemy vessels. Target the empty space between them. Instead, the human fleet entered the battle zone just as the final defenders of New Corella were making their last stand. The refugee ships were beautiful vessels from dozens of different species, but their advanced weapons were useless against enemies. They could not touch. Draconian phase-shifted ships flickered in and out of reality like deadly ghosts. Their consciousness extractors were already at work on the planet below. Through the viewports, Captain Santos could see the lights of cities going dark as entire populations simply ceased to exist. All ships maintain formation. Captain Santos ordered through the communication system. Remember, we are not targeting the enemy vessels themselves. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim, looked confused. Captain, the Draconian ships are right there. Hundreds of them. Should we not be shooting at them? No, Captain Santos replied firmly. Dr. Tanaka, explain the plan to everyone one more time. Dr. Tanaka activated the fleet-wide communication channel. The Draconian ships maintain coherence across multiple dimensions through quantum entanglement networks. These networks require perfect synchronization to keep the ships stable in 17 different realities at once. She brought up a holographic display showing the theoretical structure of the phase shift system. If we introduce enough chaos into the quantum field around them, their entanglement will collapse. The ships will be forced back into normal space where they can be destroyed. How do we create that much chaos? Asked Captain Williams from the UES Defiance. With the most primitive weapons in our arsenal? Dr. Tanaka smiled. Nuclear mines, kinetic impactors, and electromagnetic pulse generators. We detonate them in apparently empty space to create quantum interference patterns. The human fleet spread out in a formation that would have looked random to the orderly council species. Each ship moved independently, following no predictable pattern. To the Draconians, they probably looked like scattered refugees trying to flee. Beginning Phase 1, Captain Santos announced, all ships deploy nuclear mines in grid pattern Alpha. Human ships began dropping nuclear devices throughout the battle zone, not at the flickering Draconian vessels, but in the spaces between them. To any logical observer, it looked like humanity was wasting their limited weapons on empty vacuum. The first nuclear detonations created brilliant flashes of light and radiation. The explosions had no visible effect on the phase-shifted enemy ships, which continued their assault on the planetary defenders. But Dr. Tanaka's instruments were detecting something else. Quantum interference levels rising, she reported excitedly. The nuclear detonations are creating exactly the kind of chaotic energy patterns we need. Phase 2, Captain Santos ordered. Begin kinetic bombardment. Human ships opened fire with their most primitive weapons. Mass drivers launched chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Railguns fired solid projectiles made from asteroid iron. Missile pods released thousands of simple explosive warheads. Again, none of these weapons were aimed at the Draconian ships themselves. Instead, they filled the space around the enemy fleet with random explosions and energy bursts. The refugee defenders watched in confusion as the primitive human fleet seemed to waste all their ammunition on empty space. Some of the surviving council representatives sent urgent messages. Human fleet, your targeting systems must be malfunctioning. The enemy ships are phase-shifted. You need to aim directly at them. Captain Santos ignored the advice. Continue pattern bombardment. Dr. Tanaka, what are your readings? Quantum coherence in the Draconian network is dropping, Dr. Tanaka reported. Their phase shift stability is decreasing by 12%. The effect became visible moments later. Some of the Draconian ships began flickering more rapidly, shifting between dimensions in an irregular pattern instead of their previous smooth transitions. It's working, Lieutenant Kim exclaimed. They're losing control of their phase shifting. But the Draconians quickly adapted to the new threat. Their fleet commanders began moving ships away from the areas of highest quantum interference. Their formation spread out to minimize the effects of human chaos bombardment. They're learning to counter our strategy, reported the sensor officer, moving to safe positions outside our interference field. Captain Santos had expected this. Time for Phase 3. Dr. Tanaka, are you ready? Dr. Tanaka nodded and activated a system that no advanced civilization would have ever considered using in combat. Every human ship began broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously, but they were not sending strategic communications or tactical data. Instead, the quantum spectrum filled with pure human chaos. Music from every culture on Earth, poetry in hundreds of languages, arguments between crew members, jokes, prayers, curses, and casual conversations. Lieutenant Rodriguez, sing that song your grandmother taught you, Captain Santos ordered. Captain, are you serious? Dead serious. Everyone. Broadcast whatever comes to mind. The more random and emotional, the better. The communication channels filled with an incredible mixture of human expression. Opera singers competed with rock musicians. Children's lullabies mixed with military marching songs. Love poems were broadcast alongside technical manuals and shopping lists. Dr. Tanaka's theory had been based on something the advanced civilizations had never understood. The Draconian quantum entanglement network was designed to process ordered, logical information. It could handle complex mathematical calculations and coordinate precise movements across multiple dimensions, but it could not process pure chaos. The random, emotional, contradictory signals from human minds created quantum static that overloaded the phase shift systems completely. The effect on the Draconian fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Ships that had maintained perfect dimensional stability for months began flickering wildly between realities. Some materialized inside asteroids and exploded instantly. Others phased into each other, creating cascading disasters that rippled across multiple dimensions. Their quantum coherence is collapsing, Dr. Tanaka reported with excitement. The entanglement network cannot handle the chaotic input from our broadcasts. The perfectly coordinated Draconian formation fell apart as individual ships lost synchronization with the fleet network. Vessels that had moved like a single organism now scattered in random directions, their commanders unable to maintain communication through the quantum static. But humanity's masterstroke was still coming. Dr. Tanaka had realized that the consciousness extractors worked by quantum locking onto sentient thought patterns. The devices were designed to identify and remove ordered, logical consciousness from living beings. They were not designed to handle the chaotic, emotional, contradictory nature of human thought. All crew members think as loudly as possible, Captain Santos ordered. Remember everyone you love. Think about home, about food, about stupid jokes. Fill your minds with everything that makes you human. 5,000 human minds began broadcasting their thoughts into the quantum field. Not through technology, but through the natural quantum signatures that all conscious beings produced. Love, fear, hope, anger, memories, dreams, and random nonsense flooded the dimensional space around the battle. The consciousness extractors, designed to process the orderly thoughts of advanced civilizations, began to malfunction catastrophically. Instead of removing sentient consciousness from their targets, they began feeding the chaotic human thought patterns back into the Draconian quantum network. Impossible, Dr. Tanaka whispered as her instruments registered what was happening. The consciousness extractors are reversing their function. They're pumping human chaos directly into the Draconian ship's control systems. The enemy fleet began to tear itself apart from the inside. Ships that had existed in perfect quantum harmony across 17 dimensions suddenly found their systems flooded with human emotions, memories, and random thoughts. Draconian crew members, who had spent centuries thinking in ordered, logical patterns, suddenly found their minds filled with images of Earth sunsets, human laughter, and the taste of chocolate. Their perfectly synchronized movements became clumsy and unpredictable. "The entire fleet is losing cohesion," reported Lieutenant Kim in amazement. "They cannot maintain phase shift with this much interference." One by one, the Draconian ships were forced back into normal space as their quantum entanglement networks collapsed. For the first time in months, the enemy vessels became solid, targetable objects that conventional weapons could hit. The refugee defenders immediately opened fire with everything they had. Advanced energy weapons that had been useless against phase-shifted targets now tore through Draconian hulls with devastating effect. But the strangest part was still coming. As more human chaos flooded into their systems, some Draconian ships began moving in completely random patterns. Their weapons fired at empty space. Their engines activated and deactivated without any apparent purpose. "Captain," Dr. Tanaka called, out with wonder in her voice. "I think the consciousness extractors have backfired so badly that they are pulling human thoughts into Draconian minds. Some of their crew members are actually beginning to think like humans." The implications were staggering. Draconians who had spent their entire lives thinking in perfect order and logic were suddenly experiencing human chaos firsthand. The shock of random emotional thought was completely overwhelming their ordered consciousness. The end came not with explosions or dramatic space battles, but with an eerie silence that spread across the new Corella system like a wave. One moment, hundreds of Draconian ships were flickering between dimensions in chaotic, uncontrolled patterns. The next moment, they simply were not there anymore. Captain Santos stared at her sensor displays in disbelief. "Dr. Tanaka," Are you reading this? Confirmed, Dr. Tanaka replied, her voice barely a whisper. Complete disappearance of all Draconian vessels. No energy signatures, no quantum traces, no debris. They have vanished entirely from our reality. Lieutenant Kim ran diagnostic checks on all the human fleet's sensors. All systems functioning normally. Whatever happened to them, it was not caused by equipment failure on our side. The refugee defenders throughout the system were broadcasting confused reports. Ships from dozens of different species confirmed the same impossible reading. The Draconian erasure fleet, which had been destroying civilizations across the galaxy, had simply ceased to exist. Dr. Tanaka worked frantically to understand what had happened. Her quantum analysis equipment had recorded the entire event, but the data seemed to defy physics. The feedback loop from our chaos broadcasting created a recursive collapse in their quantum entanglement network, she explained to the gathered human officers. When the consciousness extractors began pulling human thoughts into Draconian minds, it overloaded their ability to maintain coherence across multiple dimensions. Captain Santos tried to make sense of the technical explanation. So they were destroyed? Not exactly, Dr. Tanaka said slowly. According to these readings, they still exist, but they have been displaced across infinite dimensional phases simultaneously. They are alive in countless different realities, but they can never return to this one. The implications were staggering. The most feared military force in galactic history had not been destroyed by advanced weapons or superior technology. They had been undone by something as simple as human chaos and emotional thinking. Word of the impossible victory spread across the galaxy within hours. The few surviving communication networks carried news that seemed too incredible to believe. Humanity, the species that had been rejected from the Galactic Council just months ago, had defeated the threat that had destroyed ancient civilizations. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships from every surviving species began converging on the new Corella system, not to attack but to meet the humans who had accomplished the impossible. Ambassador Sarah Chen received an urgent message from Earth just 12 hours after the battle. President Martinez appeared on the holographic display with tears in her eyes. Sarah, the entire galaxy is trying to contact us. We have received formal requests for alliance from 47 different species just today. The Council wants to hold an emergency session to offer us membership immediately. Sarah smiled as she looked out at the human fleet still maintaining position near New Corella. Tell them we will consider their offer, but this time, we want to discuss the terms. The new council session was held on New Corella itself, in a hastily constructed meeting hall that could accommodate representatives from dozens of species. The atmosphere was completely different from the Crystal Palace where humanity had been mocked months earlier. This time, Ambassador Chen sat at the head of the council table. Species that had laughed at human primitiveness now waited eagerly for her words. The same beings who had called humans chaotic and violent now praised those exact qualities as the salvation of galactic civilization. Honored representatives, Sarah began, humanity is grateful for your offers of alliance and membership. We are pleased that our different way of thinking proved useful in this crisis. Counselor Zexhai of the Corellan Empire leaned forward eagerly. Ambassador Chen, we want to offer immediate full membership with all privileges. We will share our most advanced technologies with your species. We offer the same, added Dr. Lamara from the Advanced Research Division, dimensional travel, matter synthesis, consciousness transfer technology, anything your people desire. Sarah raised her hand to quiet the excited voices. We appreciate these generous offers, but before we accept membership, we want to propose changes to how the Council operates. The alien representatives looked confused. What changes could primitive humans possibly want to make to their advanced civilization? We propose the diversity doctrine, Sarah continued. The principle that different approaches to problems make the alliance stronger as a whole. Instead of expecting all members to think in similar ways, we should celebrate the unique perspectives each species brings. She activated a holographic display showing the recent battle data. The Draconian threat succeeded because it was designed to counter logical, orderly thinking. Our chaotic approach worked because it was completely different from what they expected. What? Are you suggesting? Asked a crystal being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. Mixed crews, Sarah replied. Ships and research teams that combine different species, different ways of thinking, different technologies. When we face unknown threats in the future, we want multiple approaches available immediately. The concept was revolutionary for species that had spent millennia perfecting their individual technologies, but the recent crisis had proved that perfection could become a weakness when facing truly unexpected challenges. Dr. Lumara was the first to understand the implications. You want to institutionalize chaos as a problem-solving method, not chaos. For its own sake, Sarah clarified. Controlled diversity, combining incompatible ideas to create solutions that no single species would discover alone. The debate that followed lasted for days. Some species worried that mixing their advanced technologies with primitive human methods would make them less efficient. Others feared that chaotic thinking would disrupt their carefully ordered societies. But the memory of empty worlds and vanished civilizations was too fresh. Every representative had seen what happened when the galaxy's most advanced defenses failed completely. The final vote was unanimous. The diversity doctrine became the founding principle of the new Galactic Alliance, with Earth as a full member, and humanity's chaotic thinking recognized as essential for the Alliance's survival. Captain Santos was offered command of the first mixed-species exploration fleet. The UES Unity carried crew members from 12 different civilizations, all working together to explore the unknown regions of space where logic and order might not be enough. But perhaps the most important result came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the battle, Dr. Tanaka detected faint quantum signals from deep space. The patterns were unlike anything in the standard databases, but they seemed almost familiar. Captain, I think these signals are coming from the displaced Draconian fleet, she reported to Santos during a planning meeting. They are trying to communicate from their dimensional exile. The signals were garbled and difficult to translate, but the message seemed to be a request for help rather than a threat. Captain Santos looked at her mixed crew of humans and aliens working together at their stations. What do you think? Should we try to help them? Dr. Tanaka, who had created the weapon that displaced the Draconians, considered the question carefully. If we can help them return to normal reality, it might prove that our chaotic methods can solve problems as well as create them. And, added Lieutenant Kim with a slight smile, maybe experiencing human thoughts gave some of them a new perspective. On the galaxy, the decision was unanimous. Instead of leaving their former enemies trapped in dimensional exile, the mixed crew would attempt a rescue mission. If humanity could accidentally create an impossible problem, perhaps they could also discover an impossible solution. The final image that spread across the galaxy was one that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Human ships departing for the galactic rim, their crews a mixture of species who had once mocked Earth's chaos but now embraced it. They were heading toward unknown space to attempt the rescue of enemies who had tried to erase all life from the galaxy. Behind them, New Corella was being rebuilt as the new capital of the Galactic Alliance. The planet that had nearly been the site of civilization's last stand was becoming a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they worked together. Ambassador Chen stood in the new council chambers, watching ships from dozens of worlds arriving and departing. The careful order that had characterized the old council was gone, replaced by the productive chaos of species learning from each other. She thought back to that day in the Crystal Hall, when humanity had been rejected for being too primitive and chaotic. The aliens had been right about humans being different. They had simply been wrong about whether that difference was a weakness. A communication alert interrupted her thoughts. Captain Santos was reporting from the edge of known space where her mixed crew was attempting to make contact with the displaced Draconian fleet. Ambassador, we have established communication. The Draconians want to negotiate their return to normal reality, but they have one condition. What condition? Sarah asked. They want to send representatives to learn more about human chaos. Apparently, experiencing our thoughts gave them new ideas about how consciousness can work. They want to understand how we think so differently from every other species in the galaxy.